Imagine the scenario. Parents come home from a dinner date to find a mess all over the kitchen. There are messy bowls and a mixer on the counter. There are utensils covered in batter sitting in the sink. There's an empty can of icing on the counter, and they find the kids at the table with the forks in hand about to cut into something. And the parents, in all sincerity, look at them and say, "So, what did you all do tonight?" Imagine this scenario. One of 3 roommates comes home to the apartment, staggers to the couch, and just collapses. They have a slight limp as they walk. They seem to have a black eye on one side. Their eyes are all red as if they have been crying them out for hours. Sitting across from them, the other 2 who share the apartment ask, "So, how was work today?" It almost seems ridiculous, doesn't it? Well, try this one. Jesus says, "Eventually, I'm going to die." Not like everybody's eventually going to die. Eventually, they're going to kill me. I'm going to die, but on the 3rd day, I'm going to be raised. And then after that, some guards come and take him. He's killed. He's placed in a tomb. The tomb is sealed. And on the 3rd day, the stone is gone, and so is Jesus. Upon hearing all of this, most choose to say, I'm not sure. One of them actually goes to the tomb, runs, Peter, gets there, and then says, I don't know what to think about all this. It almost sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? But hear it in Luke's words. If we go up just a little above the section that Jesse read today, we get the account from the resurrection according to Luke. On the 1st day of the week, at early dawn, they came to the tomb, taking the spices that had been prepared. They found the stone rolled away from the tomb, but when they went in, they did not find the body. While they were there, perplexed about this, suddenly 2 men in dazzling clothes stood beside them. The women were terrified and bowed their faces to the ground. But the men said to them, "Why do you look for the living among the dead? He is not here, but is risen. Remember how he told you while he was still in Galilee that the Son of Man must be handed over to sinners and be crucified and on the 3rd day rise again?" Then they remembered all of his words. And returning to the tomb, from the tomb, they told all of this to the 11 and to all the rest. Now it was Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary the mother of James, and the other women with them who told this to the apostles. But these words seemed to them an idle tale, and they did not believe them. But Peter got up and ran to the tomb. Stooping and looking in, he saw the linen cloths by themselves. He went home, amazed at what had happened. It is as if Jesus told them what would happen. It happened, and they're surprised, but not really sure it happened. And then on the same day, the text that Jesse read is the next verses. It's not the next day. It's not a week later. It's still that 3rd day after Jesus dies. It's still that 1st day of the week. Word has gotten out. Word has started to spread among the believers. But belief has not spread among them. It seems ridiculous. Some of them, I think the anonymity is to protect them from their own embarrassment, right? It may be as if Luke is covering up who all was really embarrassed here and how ridiculous they must have looked. Jesus is walking with them, talking with them, teaching with them, and no one makes the connection. I'm wondering when he started explaining from Moses to Jesus how they missed it, right? How did they miss it? It's not until they break bread that anyone understands. It's not until they break bread that anyone recognizes Jesus. Now, there are a lot of things that could be going on here. We don't know how Jesus appeared. Did he look different? Did he appear different? Did he get a nice shave? We don't know. Was his face covered? Was it colder out? Did he have a wrap? Was his head draped? Did they not see? We also don't know if this was fully physical Jesus. Was it a vision? Did others see him too? If he can simply disappear at the table after they recognize him, was he fully there in a way that we would consider tangible? Remember also, this version of the story is written down 100 years after it happens. It's not a first-hand account. It's probably not even a second-hand account. This is how the community is remembering and retelling the story. So it leaves us to ask an important question. What are we to take from it today? Rather than getting wrapped up in the details, rather than getting lost in the minutiae of what was and wasn't, what's there, what's missing, what is it for us today? Well, maybe we need to get better at noticing God around us. Maybe we need to pay more attention to the signs around us every day. Maybe we need to see Jesus beyond the places we're accustomed. Beyond the places we're accustomed. The disciples saw Jesus in the breaking of the bread. In the breaking of the bread. This was something they had done just a few days before. At the end of the Passover meal, Jesus took bread and broke it and said, "Now, when this happens, remember me." It's like he was preparing them for this very moment. Although they missed so many other things, why should they hold on to this one, right? But in that meal, think about how many times they broke bread with Jesus. How many times they ate. The intimacy of sharing a meal together. The ways it connects us. It was in something familiar to them. A place they were accustomed to being with Jesus. That they recognized Jesus. Today, I think people go to church because it is an accustomed place to finding God. It is the place we expect to see God. It's the place we saw God when we were children, when we felt God around us. I think people come to church like these disciples came to the table, always hoping Jesus would be there, able to remember God in a place we've experienced God before. And if it wasn't this particular church, it's in a place where we sang the songs and heard a melody that was familiar in our heart. It's the place where we experienced the prayers and the liturgy, where we heard the scriptures read and shared, and we might have connected with God. We come to a place seeking God where we might expect to find God, because there's so much to remind us of God's presence in this place. Whether it's the music, whether it's the liturgy, whether it is the warmth and love shared between people who come into this space, God can be felt, God can be found. The face of God can be seen in each of the people within our community. Church is a place we should expect to experience God. Now, that doesn't mean we will, right? People come to church all the time and leave knowing there was something missing for them. People come to church all the time and leave disappointed that they didn't get their fill of God, the Jesus they needed for the week to continue. Sometimes that's us as the user. We come to church with lofty expectations. We come to church with ridiculous expectations. We come to church expecting God to do all the work, unprepared to invest ourselves, to be centered, to be present and ready to receive. Sometimes it's ridiculous expectations. Sometimes it's church at its worst. Sometimes it's a church that ends up divisive, ends up grumpy. A church where no one's there to invest in it, and we all are coming to expect God to do it, and we all wonder why God didn't do it for all of us. Sometimes people come to church and find hurt, and so they never come back again. Not only do they not come back again, they stop looking for God in the expected places. Let's be honest. Church should be a place where we expect to experience God. Some people leave church forever because they simply expected to feel more. Like the disciples on Easter, we can miss what is all around us, even when it should be obvious. We can miss what God is doing, even in the expected places. So how are we to ever notice God in the unexpected? If we can't notice God in the expected places, if when the bread is broken and Jesus is sitting with us and we're still slow to notice, how will we spot God in the unexpected places? To see God around us, to experience Jesus in our midst, can require a practice, a prayerful practice, centering ourselves, opening our eyes. A mindset of mindfulness is the trendy way to say it. Developing a practice of looking for God around us, asking the question, where do you see God? Maybe even reflecting at the end of each day, where have you seen God today? But mostly, I think it requires living like we believe that God is still at work. I think it requires living like we believe God is still at work. Living like we believe the stranger might have something to teach us as we walk along the road. Living like we believe our gifts are worth sharing with others, that what God gave us is worth contributing. Living like we believe that love is more powerful than fear and hate. Living like we believe that God is doing something in our own lives that if we just paid attention, others might be amazed to see. And that we ourselves might even be amazed to see if we were looking. It requires living like we believe that God is still at work. If we believe that how we treat others will help them see God, we all have a better chance of seeing God around us. If we believe that working for justice will bring about God's kingdom, we all have a better shot at living in that kingdom. If we believe that God is still speaking and we take time to listen, then we all have a better opportunity to hear, to see, to feel God all around us, to see what God is up to. We cannot go through the world with our eyes shut. We cannot go through the world with our eyes shut. Shut to the needs of others. Shut to the potential of every person, including ourselves. Shut to the pain and the promise of life in community. Sometimes it's hard. Getting along with people is difficult, but it's with people that we are most likely to see, to hear, and feel the presence of God. You see, it wasn't just bread at that table. It wasn't just bread at that table that was familiar. It was the community. It was their friends, their loved ones. It was a gathered community that had been gathering together for 3 years, breaking bread with Jesus. They had invested in each other along the way. Some from the beginning. Some had just shown up. Some clearly didn't want their names printed in the story. But they had been together. And they felt Jesus among them. For about 25 years, the Roman Catholic Church and the Christian Church Disciples of Christ that I grew up in had a running dialogue about communion, Lord's Supper, Eucharist. They had lots of names for it. They didn't quite agree on what happened. In the Catholic tradition, there's a transformation. The elements themselves transform within the blessing of worship. In my home church and the disciples, they were really nice symbols of something that was core and important to us. But it was still a cheap cracker and some grape juice. This dialogue went on, and they found common ground in one unexpected place. They both believed that Christ was not just present at the table, that Christ was not just present in the bread or the cup, the chiclets and doodahs, as me and my friends called them as kids. Christ was not just present in the symbols, but present in the community gathered. that around the table, that as church, whether we're celebrating communion or we're sharing a potluck together, a lunch together, donuts after church together, whatever it is we're sharing, even if we're just having a cup of coffee, Christ is present in the community. And when we come into worship and we celebrate the sacraments, Christ is not just present in the ritual element, but in the people. And we see that in the story today. Christ is seen on each other, and we are reminded that if we want to see God, we need to look in the familiar faces as much as places. And when we start to see God in each other, then we can start to see God in the neighbor. Then we can start to see God in the distant friend, the old friend. Then maybe the stranger. Then maybe the one who makes us feel strange. Then maybe the one who makes us uncomfortable. Then maybe in the one we would see as foreign, as other, as challenge to us. Then within our own biases, we start to see God. And then, brothers and sisters, we see the kingdom. Then we see the kingdom. But we must live with open eyes, open minds, open hearts. We must be ready to see Jesus in the unexpected, to discover what new thing God is doing now, ready to follow a spirit that will lead us. And if we do, God will show us such amazing things, and we will be left wondering, how did we not see it before? We will be left wondering, how can we make sure we never miss it again? Amen.